another edition of SaaS Forward. We look at news that are relevant to SaaS founders from India. So the first thing to notice in the last few months is that Vanity SaaS startups are tumbling down. Companies that raised at phenomenal valuation, just a story and didn't have any fundamentals to back them, they're all starting to tumble down, and they are in fact hurting founders. A company called as Fast, which was celebrated a lot in the social media in the last 1 to 2 years, raised more than $100 million, had to shut shop because they couldn't even cross about 600K of total revenue in ARR. Another company called Zilingo, which was again a celebrated startup, but had some issues in terms of some financial accounting practices within the organization, and that led to the founder having to leave the company. We don't know what the actual issues are. There is always two sides of the story. But the key thing to notice is when these founders raised at very, very inflated expectations or valuations that they set with their investors, when they're not able to reach, it's eventually hurting the founders. So Vanity SaaS, vanity businesses, it may get a lot of fanfare initially, but eventually it comes back to hurt founders. On the other hand, companies that are doing 3 million, 5 million in ARR and are profitable, they are raising money at a very handsome valuation, some of which have been announced in the last month or two, and many more that are on the pipeline to be announced. And they are able to garner good valuation multiple, and they are able to have conversation with investors a lot more smoothly because they are backed by the fundamentals. They're profitable, they're growing decently, and they're just not growing their valuation on top of the story. In fact, the same thing is happening on a public market as well. In the last 3 months, a lot of valuation has taken a hit for even good companies. In fact, many people are calling this as a SaaS massacre or a SaaSacre. However, if you look at companies which are having good fundamentals, they are doing really well. Companies that are on solid business grounds, they're doing well. For instance, Microsoft just released their earnings report last quarter. And if you notice that LinkedIn itself did about 3.4 billion, which puts it at about 14 billion ARR. Now at that particular ARR, their acquisition that was done 5 years ago at $26 billion looks like a steal. A lot of the public market rhetoric was around saying inflation is coming in, there is war, and these are the macro trends that are starting to affect the market and are creating a bear market. But then how would that account for something like a LinkedIn and a Microsoft, which had a phenomenal quarter and was able to grow really, really well? There are many other companies in the public market similarly who are doing really well despite all these macro trends not looking so great. So the takeaway from this is that if your fundamentals are really strong, then you don't have to worry about like what is happening in the market. But if you're not strong on the fundamentals and you are blowing with the wind, when the winds change, then they start hurting you as well. So the next thing that I want to ask is, what is common between Forrest Gump, the Hindi movie Sholay, Andhadhun, Medallia, UiPath, and Procore? Now that might look like a very unusual association of B2B SaaS companies and some of these movie names. But the thing that connects them all is that all of them are sleeper hits. Medallia was founded in 2001. It did its Series A in 2011, and it did its IPO in 2019. Procore took about 10 years and the rise of mobile, and it is about $8 billion now. UiPath took 10 years to get to its first $1 million in revenue, and it is more than $8 billion right now. So some of the biggest successes that happen, they don't have a lot of fanfare. There is a saying that it takes 15 years to become an overnight success, and that is more true in B2B than any other place. In fact, in B2B SaaS, most of the big successes are sleeper hits, and those that have very big fanfare initially, they actually don't do well. Those that create a lot of glitter fast and a lot of noise fast actually fade out fast. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you are a founder that is working on a deep domain problem, as solving a high value problem in that particular domain, then cultivate the skill of patience. It'll take longer, but you will be able to produce something like a Sholay or a Forest Gump.